You should be good.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to our BOE curriculum meeting today, Tuesday, April 19th. We just called the meeting to order. I think we're all there. Is Amy there? I don't.
No, it doesn't look
Amy's
like.
not. Yeah. All right. We have a group. So we're just going to go into it. We're going to start with the first discussion item, which is the visual performing arts K12 update. Susie, are you going to lead us, or is Corey going to lead us on that?
Miss Gillette will be leading us this morning.
I think I have it. So today we're going to talk about 3 different items. We're going to give you updates on the K12 VPA department. We are going to open a discussion on the K12 homework policy, which was what the committee asked for last time. And then we can have some follow-up based on what we hear from the committee. And then we're going to end with an update on the curriculum writing process that Jeff and Annie brought to the committee earlier. I can't remember exactly which meeting it was, because we wanted you to see where we are in that process, what the timeline is like, and what the supports and expectations are moving into the spring. All right. So I'm going to start with a VPA update, and Linda is going to jump in with some elementary specifics. But just to start, the reason that this is on our agenda is that we did realize this winter, late fall, that while there was a lot of behind the scenes work going on in this department, we were not sharing out everything that was happening. So this is an opportunity for us to update the committee, update the public, update the board about all the different areas that we've been working on in this department, especially over the last 2 years, and then specific to the last few months. So I'm going to start by talking about Celebrations K12 in the VPA department. So of course, one thing to celebrate is just the return to in-person performances, our shows at the high school level and at the middle school levels. The productions have concluded. They were highly successful. The elementary level, Farmingville, brought back their show, which was again very successful. And then if you look at our calendar online, you can see all the different musical performances in person that we're hosting this spring. Another thing that we're very excited about to bring back are the elementary art shows in the elementary schools this year. Obviously, in the past 2 years, we struggled to get people in, and now we are actually able to bring people in to our buildings. So if you want to just give us some dates and a little update on that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Again, good morning, everyone. So yes, we're super excited. We're super happy that we're bringing back in-person art shows in all of our elementary schools this spring. Our art teachers, our art department, has been working alongside myself and our building administrators, our principals, in terms of designing what the shows will look like. We're really striving for consistency across the 6 schools, where student artwork will be displayed for all of our families, kindergarten through 5th grade. We're looking at inviting in our PTAs to support our teachers in terms of displaying the work, setting up the show, even taking down, possibly if needed, once the shows are completed. Most of the shows, all of the shows are going to be taking place in a range of dates from end of May to the beginning of June. We've asked that our district website, our calendar is updated with the dates, showing which shows are posted for each school, the time, the location. And then I know that our building principals have been communicating alongside teachers and families around when those shows will take place.
Great. So then we are also looking forward to our celebrations at the middle school level. Last year was the first time they integrated art and music into their celebration, which was like a big festival. And we're looking forward to those same celebrations this year. As we've mentioned previously this year, we have been looking for additional ways to get our student work out into the community. So we are working with the Ridgefield Arts Council you can expect to see different musical performances popping up around town and different pieces of visual art as well. And then secondarily, we have been sharing out through the newsletter celebrations of student photos of student art as a way to just continue to share easily the work that our students are doing. So in addition to that, we are going to do a virtual celebration K12 off of our website. That was something from COVID that we decided that we wanted to bring back. We are going to continue to look to see how we can make sure that student art is at the bagel shop and the pizza place. But in the meantime, there are things that we can do even on our end that we control that can regularly celebrate the work that's happening in our schools across the department. So not just music, but the performing arts. We want to have clips of those shows in case people are not able to see those recent shows, and then have continuous art shows of specific grade levels from specific schools. So that's something to look forward to and something that we are continuing to build. I have a small group of parents who have joined a committee to continue to help me support this work virtually and in the community. So really that's where we are with celebrations at this time. The next item we wanted to update you on was professional learning. We shared with you that this year, the Aldrich was the organization that we leaned on for professional learning for our K-12 teachers. It was very meaningful and moving to see that work take place. For me, I think the most powerful learning that we had was professional learning on bringing mindfulness into art as a way to, into art instruction as a way to transition our students back into schools this fall. So that was very successful. But we are looking forward as we're thinking about our K-12 department and how we're building that department and supporting our teachers. And one of the things that Mike Yagid, who is the assistant principal at the high school and has really committed himself to supporting this K-12 department, has leaned into is something called teaching for artistic behaviors. It is a way of teaching art. It's a methodology. I don't pretend to be an expert in that, but we are sending 2 teachers this summer to a week-long course on what that means, teaching to artistic behaviors. It is really about bringing creativity and choice and voice into the art experience for students. So our teachers are going to engage in that, and then together with me and Linda and Mike Yagid at the high school level, we're going to plan how that's going to impact our professional learning plan for next year. One of the interesting things that we've noticed as we've been looking at other school districts' art departments is that when they're posting in the postings for art teachers, one of the things that they're asking for is teachers who have experience in teaching for artistic behaviors, also known as TAB, because in education we have a lot of acronyms. So that is something that we wanted to make sure as a district that we really understood what that meant, and then our work will be deciding with the team how that impacts our curriculum and our day-to-day teaching. But it's so far at first glance and first study, it seems like it's worth the time. So we are looking forward to sending our teachers to that and then planning the professional learning in response to that.
Corey, is that K-12?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so then the next part we want to talk about is leadership. So it has been a struggle the last 2 years in doing all this work, because we don't actually have an administrator that is dedicated to music or to art or to VPA across the district. Now, I'm very dedicated, as you've heard. Linda Johnson has put in a lot of time at the elementary level. And like I said, that Mike Yagid, the assistant principal at the high school, has really jumped in. He's also attended professional learning sessions around art leadership. So he has really jumped in to support this department. But with that in mind, we looked at some of the existing structures in place and tried to figure out if there was a way for us with no cost and utilizing the structures that we already have, that we could expand and create some additional leadership opportunities, looking across that K-12 spectrum. And what we discovered was that at our high school level, that department chair role, which is a .4 release position, was a place where we could perhaps gain some traction. So we have spoken very candidly about how many of our high school students are choosing electives that are not always in the arts. And that we have seen a reduction in that department over time. And that is something that we don't want to see continue. And one of the leverage points that's really important for enrollment there is not only course creation, which I'll talk more about, and opportunities for kids to engage in a variety of different ways across the arts, but it's also that middle school to high school transition. So thinking about what the middle school experience is for students engaging in the arts, and then how those 8th graders are informed, excited, enticed into the opportunities that are in the high school. So what we have done is we've taken that 9-12 department chair for the visual and performing arts, and we have extended the scope of that role to include the middle school. So that position now, instead of just overseeing the department at the high school, is going to include the music and visual art teachers from the middle school. So
Corey,
that,
can I just, sorry,
Yep.
if I can just jump in here. So what happens at the high school, depending upon the size of the department, is we make a decision whether or not we need a chairperson or like a senior teacher or a lead teacher. And given the size of the department right now, this role would really transition more into one of those senior teacher positions rather than a position that has release. Because as Corey said, and very candidly is saying, and it's not new news, it's new to us because we're new, but it's not new news, is we're seeing declining, we're seeing a decline in student selection around the arts. And because of that, naturally, the department gets smaller and smaller. And so what might have normally happened is we would have said, okay, well, let's not have a department chair, but instead let's have a senior teacher. I think that's what we call them, right, Jeff? Senior teachers at the high school?
Department leader.
Department leader.
Yeah.
And so we would have transitioned into that type of role, which doesn't have the release. But instead of doing that, as Corey said, given the, our dedication and real interest in providing supports to grow this department, 612 really, because even though it's not a choice perhaps at the the middle school in the same way that it is at the high school, what we do know is by having great transitions and great programming and great articulation, we ultimately get to the end goal at the high school. And so I just wanted to take a minute to just explain that role a little bit, because the expanding of the scope, it might feel like, wow, you're asking for a lot more. So yeah, really, in theory, we are, but the reason we're able to do that is because the departments at the high school are smaller. Go ahead, Corey, sorry.
okay, so thank you. No, that further elaborates that point. So we had the need, we realized the articulation was so important, the connections across the schools, and having one person in that role will also support me and Linda and Mike Yeaget as we continue to move this K-12 work forward. So that is something that we are interviewing for now. We have some great candidates, and we are really excited.
Sorry, Corey, one more thing.
Yep.
The other point that you make, and Mike Yeaget is great, Corey's great, Linda's great, but having somebody with content expertise can't be overlooked. And we've said that all along. So having someone that can speak that language is incredibly important. And I think that, you know, for us, that's why having somebody in that role, 612 is incredibly important, that can speak the language of the visual and performing arts.
Exactly true. And what I was going to say after that was, even more importantly, what we're seeing in the interviews is the need to continue to bring those departments together and not make it be such distinct lanes. I'm a performer, I'm in shows, I'm a musician, I'm an artist. So also bringing together a leader that can help us integrate those lanes a little further, so that they don't seem so distinct from each other, and that we can all work together to create a really rich pathway. Because oftentimes kids who play in the orchestra might want to be in the show. Kids who sing might also be interested in visual arts. So really making sure that we have nice collaboration and connection across those departments is a continued goal. So I feel like that, I think we've given a pretty good overview of the leadership for next year and what we're really excited about and the reasons that we expanded that role. And I just want to say even further, lastly, in terms of course design at the high school, Jeff and Annie will talk about this a little bit more, where we are in that process. You will see a lot of new course options coming up with the new courses this year, because what we realized is that we need to make sure that pathways are open to students. So students who are interested in art who may not be an art major, we want to make sure that they see a place for themselves in the visual arts, or perhaps in chorus. Just because you sing in chorus doesn't mean that you have to pick chorus for the rest of your life. It might be something you want to do for a half of 1 year. So thinking about how we can open pathways, what are some new courses, looking at other school districts, what they offer for art and music and performing arts. So you can expect to hear in further updates about those new courses, how we're trying to open those pathways and really make it more enticing and a half-year opportunity to engage in the arts instead of having to pick a full-year opportunity. Just because we know how packed student schedules are, we feel like giving them a half-year opportunity will get more student input. So we are continuing to look at the data on how students are selecting courses, talking to kids, and then responding by offering them some new ways to interact and engage. So that was an update on VPA. I talked about celebrations, our professional learning updates, and then what we think is really exciting in terms of leadership. So happy to take any questions.
Tina, do you want to call on Sean, or do you want Corey too?
It's okay. Great update, by the way. And the integration from middle school up was well needed, because we did lose a lot in the transition from middle school to high school. I know that because, you know, my kids are music kids. They went through that and their friends, so I get it. The other place where we were losing a lot of kids, frankly, was that ability to take a half-year course. They couldn't fit it into their schedule because they were packed with APs and all sorts of other stuff that made it difficult to take a music or a chorus or an art class. So I really love the idea of being able to do a half year and just kind of dip your toe into that to see what you like, because you don't have to be married to chorus for 4 years or to the orchestra. You can pick and choose here and there, which is great. That wasn't really possible before. So I like that very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, I have a follow-up question. So the first is for, it kind of segues from what Shauna said. You know, you keep talking about pathways and the fact how important it is to, for lack of a better word, entice kids in middle school. Have we looked at maybe flexibility in pathways at that level too? You know, because it's an age where they're still trying to understand, they're growing into adolescence, and sometimes they want to take orchestra, but maybe they don't, and they want to take art, and maybe they don't want to take both of them. I think that's my first question, and I may be totally wrong on this, and I think because I do not have a child with special needs, but is it true, and this is something I've heard, if a child has an IEP, do they have equal opportunities to take a language, choose a language, choose art, and to choose music, because I think that was a confusion, or somebody mentioned that. So I wanted to clear that out. I'm not sure.
Okay, so I can answer the first part first.
Sure.
So in terms of pathways in middle school, so right now, art, all students receive art, and it's in a rotating basis each year. For music, students do have to make a choice for the year. So they have to choose if they want to take chorus, if they want to play an instrument, or if they want to be in the music appreciation course. So we've been working a lot in music to think about how we can improve all three of those pathways. One of the things that we're working on is bringing more composing into that music elements course. So perhaps I'm not a student who wants to play violin in an orchestra, but I still might want to create music. So having those opportunities for creation, there's an app called Soundtrap that our middle school teachers have been using a lot, very successfully and very creatively. They had to use it during COVID, and now they've learned it really well and have created ways for kids to compose and create in that music elements class. So it's not, at this point, it's not really opening up a pathway, but it's really expanding that class to be more than music history and allowing kids to have more engagement with music, because then that might change what they choose to do the next year. So maybe I want to try to find a way to engage in a group playing something the next year. So that's one thing that we've worked on.
Or if you can just hold there for a sec though, before you answer Tina's second question, the underpinning of what you're asking, I think though, Tina, is whether or not philosophically at the middle school level, do we believe in offering kids more choice around, generally speaking, essentials, right? You're speaking about art and music, but generally speaking, essentials. I do know that Principal Salem, some years back, before our time, obviously, but some years back did do some studying around choice. And it obviously changes a lot of things scheduling wise, right? Because it ends up looking more like a model that you might see at the high school, for example. I think it is worth though studying and understanding more about philosophically and just developmentally, whether or not you believe in exposing kids to all things at that age level so that they can make some more definitive choices later, or do you believe philosophically that kids at that middle age can start making decisions about what they're most interested in? Not necessarily for today, but at some point in the fall, we're definitely going to have a conversation around essentials. And I imagine this will end up being a priority for Ms. Gillette's department, specifically around a course like Family Consumer Science, where kids, at the high school absolutely love that course. And, we are always in the midst of trying to navigate how many students want that course. And the challenge, which is a real one, staffing. And it's the same at the middle school, is that there aren't teachers. So at some point and we're in the predicament this coming year for our middle school, at some point you have to make a decision around the type of course and access to qualified teachers with the appropriate licensure or certification. And so that is a real conversation that's going to have to happen at the middle school, and likely going to bring in the other part of your question, Tina, which is around what are the essentials? Should kids have choice? Developmentally, is it appropriate or not? And sometimes developmentally it's appropriate maybe, but there's a philosophical piece to it that we believe that all kids should be exposed to all things, because
right,
their decision, maybe they're just too young to make that decision about no music or no art or no blank. But that it is going to have to be a part of a larger conversation around the essentials. And again, Family Consumer Science is is a real live issue that we're having trouble with right now, and had last year and had the year before, just staffing.
Absolutely. And part of this work on the K-12 departments and the pathways across the grade levels will also impact these conversations. But like Susie said, currently right now we have forced choice for kids and many of the essentials at the middle school level with actual choice around music. So that was just an example of what we're trying to do in music to give kids more exposure. So perhaps they might make other choices or see other opportunities for themselves in music that goes beyond traditional orchestra instruments and traditional experiences with music. So we're also trying to think about ways that we can update some of our offerings using the technology that's out there. And our music teachers have done a great job with that. So the second part of your question, I think, was, do all students have access to the arts? Yes. World language, Dr. De Silva, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. So all kids have access to all things, IEPs, 504s, or MTSS students. The challenge ultimately gets down to the scheduling. And while we make every effort, in particular, I struggle with world language. Anyone that knows me knows that, because when you remove a student from world language, it doesn't get easier, it gets harder. And that's a language in which kids are already come to the table. And because we only offer it at the middle school, they're not environmentally, they're not exposed to it earlier. So, you know, if there's things that come together, right? We know what middle schoolers are like. I hope they're not listening, but there's that age level, right? Where there's insecurities and self-confidence, and putting themselves out there isn't always easy. And so you do something like that with a language where you have to take risks, and you know, you might feel like people are, you know, looking at you funny when you speak the language, or you're trying things that aren't always easy. And then if you remove a student from that environment, let's say in 6th or 7th or 8th grade, due to scheduling, it only gets harder when you get to high school and you haven't had that experience in the middle school. There are times though, depending upon a student's IEP, or quite frankly, it's more MTSS there, or as much as IEP, where they might be being pulled out for reading support and math support. There's only so many hours in a day. And even though we have structures in place to support them within that schedule, it's sometimes just not enough depending upon the nature of the need. And so when we look at the nature of the need, we may prioritize a reading difficulty over, let's say, a student taking a language. Again, you've heard what I've said, and philosophically, it doesn't get easier, it gets harder. So we really do try to avoid that at all costs, but sometimes it really just boils down to a scheduling issue. And I think the middle schools, both of them, have worked hard in the past 2 years, I know for sure, in creating common schedules. So whatever's happening at CERMS would happen at ERMS, and they have structures in place so that students can get support during a typical day without necessarily being removed from an essential, but sometimes it does happen. And those, by the way, those conversations happen with the parents alongside them, making sure that it makes sense for the student, obviously first, and the parents agree with whatever choice we ultimately end up making. But those aren't easy decisions at all.
Thank you. I mean, just to follow up, I'm just glad we're having these conversations. Again, I'm going to repeat what Sean said. Sorry, Sean, but I do agree. I'm glad we're having these conversations. I'm glad we're having these conversations. I keep saying this K12, you know, we have to, I think in order for all our kids to be successful, it has to be something that we started K and it follows through to 12, because we have a great visual VPA program at high school, for example. But if the kids are not offered that at middle school, not lack offered, but if there's a lack of choice, or if just not the same kind of program, you lose those kids. And, you know, then we hear from parents that we are cutting arts, but that's not really the case. We are looking at everything holistically. So I do want to call out, I really do want to thank all of you for doing that work and continuing to do that work and highlighting. And thank you, Dr. De Silva. I think it's a great conversation. I'm looking forward to having this conversation in fall, hopefully, what we think about choice as such, you know, pathways, about the essentials for the middle school, because I know when I know it's a conversation parents have. I know it's a conversation I've had with my child, so I look forward to that.
Just one last thing, because you brought it up,
Sure.
Tina, that I want to make sure that I mention, because it is often, in particular at the high school level, where parents will, see that there's a reduction in FTE across any content area, really, but in particular around the electives. And they may perceive that as us making a cut, for example. And what families need to know is at the high school level, those electives really are student choice, right? And the lift that we have to do is exactly what Corey said. We have to make those courses so exciting that the kids would rather take that than something else, or that at minimum it balances, right? That we're not overloaded somewhere and under somewhere else, so that kids are having the opportunity for a holistic experience. And so looking at what courses are being offered, so we can have however many teachers and teaching in the department now, but the heavy lift has to be, what are we going to be offering kids come fall? What are their choices? And then how do we get kids excited about those choices, right? That family consumer science, I hope you're not listening, but that this course is more exciting than family consumer science, right? That it's or as exciting. And so therefore I'm struggling to decide between A and B. That's what that feeling needs to be for kids, because what we don't want our high school to be is, one or two or three lanes, right? That's not what a holistic high school looks like. So we want it to be diverse in terms of the offerings, and we want kids to have the opportunity for diverse selections because they're excited about it, not because we eliminated it. And so when you see reductions at the high school, it's very different than what you might see at the elementary level. It's because students haven't picked that course. And then our job is to say, okay, if they're not picking those courses, why is that? And what can we do better so that kids are getting excited about it? And a lot of times that it's a big lift, but small shifts can make a big difference for kids.
And I think the idea of that, taking that bird's eye view and looking where kids are putting themselves when they're making those elective choices, shows us what we're doing well, because we also have a lot high engagement in STEM, in science. So it's not to say that we don't recognize where we're doing well and where we're really engaging kids. But when we think about the vision of the graduate and really trying to fulfill that for our students, all students, and we think about the community we live in, where we put a high value on the arts, we do want to make sure, like Susie's saying, that we don't become a school that only has a couple lanes. Even if we're excited about what's offered in those lanes and what those experiences are like for kids, it is our job in these roles to make sure that those opportunities are there. And like Sean said, is if it's, singing in the shower type courses for first semester, I'd like to do that. I wish I could sing. I love when people can sing. I love to be around people who can sing. So why couldn't that be an option for me without feeling like I need to be, I'm a chorus person, so only chorus people take these courses, or I'm a visual arts person only. Instead, thinking about how all of us can engage in these different content areas, just to make us more well-rounded, and because they're interesting and because they're fun. So I want to, and I want to do.
I hope as we're developing new courses, we're looking at blending the disciplines. It's not all or nothing, art or STEM. There's music technology, there's art technology, there's video editing, there's audio. I mean, there's all sorts of STEM disciplines that cross into the arts. And I hope we're looking at any and all of those.
Absolutely, because that's right. So that's really just building on where we're seeing our kids are going and just adding in that art component. Absolutely. And really bringing also, Sean, to your point, bringing STEM into art. So looking at our photography course and thinking about what does that look like when we have kids every day walking around with these computers and these amazing cameras. How does that alter that course, and how can that be more accessible to kids and more engaging in that range? So absolutely. So that was
sorry, Corey, did you have to complete your sentence, or
I good. I see Amy has a question.
Okay, yeah, Amy, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, I have a child who's starting middle school next year, so I know a little bit about middle school, and I know that there are a number of different after-school clubs in the music field. And I'm just wondering how many opportunities there are for visual arts or performing art. Well, I do know that there is performing arts. So I think more visual arts. Are there a lot of club opportunities? And I love Sean's comment about more collaboration with the STEAM subjects as well. But just wondering if you could speak about any after school clubs, because I feel like that really opens the doors and opens people's eyes without a huge commitment, and they can see what they might be interested in.
Absolutely, and that is working really well at the high school. All those after school opportunities for kids in the visual and performing arts, and that is going very well, like you mentioned, Amy, at the middle school when it comes to music, and we are looking to develop that around the arts. It does mean that we need to find teachers that are available to work in those times before school, after school, and that is not always as easy as it seems, but that's definitely part of our goal to develop those opportunities so that kids who are interested in art can come after school or on a Saturday and just do more as a way to grow their passion in that lane, for sure.
Amy, I'd also say though, we are definitely more limited when it comes to after school offerings at the middle school than we are at the high school, just from a budget point of view. There aren't as many opportunities as we would like, to Corey's point, about engaging in additional ways in the future, but it just hasn't, of all the things, right, that we prioritize, that hasn't been one of them. We try to look at the in-school experience first, and then obviously the after school after, but I would say that there is definitely a limitation from my point of view on what we have available to kids after school. And, you know, I'm not 100% sure what the enrollment would be like if we did offer, but I do think that that's worth a conversation around budget time.
Anyone else? Right, we can move on to the next agenda topic. Sorry.
Okay. So that was our update on VPA, and you can expect a presentation to the Board of Education in the next month or so, where we're going to talk about all of the essentials and give an update K-12. All right, so this committee asked us to bring forward the homework policy for discussion today. So everyone's gotten it in their packets, and we are happy to hear any questions or comments about this, and then we can come back to it the next time that we meet.
Anyone? Okay,
This
Corey, let
is
me pull.
from 2019, correct?
Yes,
It's from 2019.
Yeah, I remember when it was adopted. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I'm just pulling it up. I have to pull it up on my phone, so I apologize.
no problem.
I don't have any hard copies. Okay, I think if you could just give a brief overview. I was there when I was part of the conversations when this was adopted, but I know it was adopted. The primary reason it was adopted is to ensure that kids are not overloaded with homework, right? And then there was a hard stop. Teachers can assign homework till a certain time. The policy dictates when and as much homework, you know, over religious holidays, over long weekends. Of course, AP work is totally separate from this. I think the question that I mean, maybe you can address it, is we did not have block scheduling at that time. And how does this work out? How does this policy work when you have block schedules and you have the freeze? And, you know, it was very different. I didn't have a child at the high school. I did not understand how the A to G or whatever day worked. I only understand the AB day, and I know they have freeze. So how does this work with the block scheduling? Because this is something that I've been hearing from children, parents. So I just wanted you to talk about that.
Okay. So one thing, while I was not here when this study occurred and then this policy was implemented, this is very typical of school districts. It's important to have a common lens into homework and a common philosophy around homework. So that's typical. It's important because it's always something that building leaders can come back to, and that parents can look to understand what we think about homework, the role of homework, the kind of homeworks, the kind of homework that students can expect. And really, just like most districts, we have some idea around minutes and time that we believe that students should be spending doing homework. So that's just, it's typical. It's very important that this came out of a study. Jeff gave me a little bit of background on how that study went. So that's a great thing to know, that there was a lot of teacher representation and all different levels were involved in putting together this recommendation. And I know that there was work done after this, but again, this was 2019, we know, right before COVID. But luckily in our district, this was done, and it was done well in a collaborative way. Jeff or Annie, would you like to talk about the impact of this homework policy with the block schedule?
Yeah, absolutely. Because Tina, it's funny you mentioned that, because as I'm looking at the policy, the one part of the policy, you know, that has as a shift from when it was first written is the nights per week, right? So that's the comment. So as of right now, you know, the teachers are following the policy as written, because that's, I think, their obligation. So it's for people who aren't aware, each course at the high school is given a homework code, H1, H2, H3. And that's what determines the amount of time and the nights per week that a student would receive homework. So if it's a homework code 1, that's the least amount of time. So that would be 10 to 20 minutes. And that's 0 to 3 nights per week. And then it would go up from homework code 2, homework code 3. So as of right now, teachers are still operating under this existing policy, both in terms of the amount of time and the number of nights per week that they're being assigned. Now, because of the block schedule, a student may only see a class 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the AB schedule. So what that means is that there's still allotted the number of nights per week that would still fit that part of the policy. And the amount of homework time is still supposed to follow that H1, H2, H3 code, where it's 10 to 20 minutes for an H1, 20 to 35 minutes per course for an H2, and then up to 35 to 50 minutes for an H3. So I think that's just important for everyone to hear, that depending on the number of courses, so if you're in a lot of AP courses, for example, that have a homework code of H3, each of those courses could have 35 to 50 minutes of homework 4 to 5 times within the week. So I guess a long way to answer, we're still following the existing policy as written, but it hasn't been updated since 2019, as it's been mentioned. So as of right now, the effects of the block schedule, you know, isn't currently part of this policy.
Thank you. I mean, that was where I was coming from, because, you know, if your child has math, for example, AP World History, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, there is amount of homework. And you're right, when this policy was written, I remember when the assistant superintendent I was part of the parent representation, a part of that team. So I do remember the amount of work that went on, the collaboration went on. I know this was a huge effort by the district, and it was great by the board before us, the one that adopted us. And the reasoning behind it was also they wanted to take the load off the kids. You know, they did not want kids staying up for X amount of hours. So, and I think that's why I wanted to bring it up, so that we can hopefully bring it to the policy committee and we can look forward. If block scheduling is the way to go, if this is something you know, as teachers, as leaders, as administrators, and as a board, we want to talk about, just something I wanted to highlight. Rachel, that makes sense, because yes.
So I just want to add for clarification. So what we're talking about are the charts, and that seems to me that it's under the regulations, but I could be wrong. And regulations are not under the purview of the Board of Education. Unless I have a printed copy. Maybe my copy is wrong, but it says regulation approved. And the first part is policy adopted. That was June 11th, 2018.
You're right, Rachel.
Okay, so just to clarify, so those charts are not under our purview as a board.
Okay, sorry, I don't have the printed, of course. I have everything.
No, that's okay, Tina. No.
Yeah.
The way in which it looks in your packet, Tina, it looks like it's all
Together.
one, right? But
Yes,
it actually
yes.
is separated out. And I think there's some intentionality around that, Rachel, so that the administration alongside faculty and teachers can make decisions that ebb and flow, right, based on what their needs are, just like the policy says, the objective of the class, developmentally appropriate. But sometimes kids may need a little bit more, and so you can make that shift within the regulation, allowing for that flexibility.
Okay.
Absolutely, because you wouldn't want like a board member to say, oh no, I don't think a kindergartner should be reading X amount of minutes per night.
Right.
You want that to fall under the day-to-day operations of the administration.
Of this, yes. And that's the part, so in the online version, it just reads as one full thing, and
It does.
okay, that makes sense. Sorry, I'm just reading through. Sorry, anyone has any questions? John, Amy?
You know, this is funny. My fifth grader just came home the other day and he said to me, you know, Mommy, when I go to middle school, I'm going to have a lot of homework. It's a lot more homework because we're going to be, you know, more mature and we're going to handle a lot more. I'm going to be able to show him this chart and say, no, honey, it's just 10 more minutes next year. That's it. You know, and I hear often about the load of homework at middle school, but it's good to be able to see this chart to say, nope, actually, it's just this. And, you know, there's a lot of other things that I'm sure everyone's navigating in middle school. So it might feel like that much more, but, you know, it's good to see this visual and how it progresses over time.
It is. Having a child who's actually knows all these numbers, it really helps him plan his courses. I think Amy knows that my kid is one of the few kids who will tell you what an H3 means and what an AP homework means. I just think it's great for, as these kids progress, Amy, you'll see this with children. It helps them plan, you know, if they take an H3 course load and if they're taking 4 on them, they need to understand there's this amount of homework or expect potentially this amount of homework. It's not all the time, but it helps that. And I think, I again just want to remind parents that when you're planning for high school, when you're planning for middle school, when you're thinking about all these courses, you know, there's so much more, and don't take all the high end. I know Sean agrees to that. Every high end course is not about it. It's just not taking the highest end course, because when you talk courses and you have 5 H3 courses, that's a lot of homework, or potentially a lot of homework. So talk to your children. Look at, we do have something written up, sorry, Rachel, regulation, but there's a policy about it too. But there is a chart there. And I think it's just important that parents understand that, especially at this time when we are talking about social emotional health. And there's so much more than beyond all the AP courses in the world.
And I also think when you look at, I know that when minutes are put in by a school district, what I can do at the elementary level in 20 minutes might be different than the person next to me, and really talk to your classroom teacher, because that is the point of having it be minutes and not based on assignments, because they feel like that is an appropriate amount of time to put in. Wherever you get to inside of that time limit, that's a stop for you. And it might vary in the night. There might be some math problems that you're really confused about, and it doesn't make sense to just spend hours and hours trying to figure out a math problem when my teacher could have helped me on it the next day and I could have showed her my first try. So there is philosophy behind those minutes, and it is important for parents to communicate with teachers how your student is progressing through those minutes.
Thank you. That's a great point, Corey. I remember even, I think we said in one of the other meetings that if it's 20 minutes, if your child has struggled on something for 30 minutes, hard stop, go to the teacher and try to make them understand, because that's how they're assigned. So thank you for that.
Well,
Any other questions?
When the policy was put together, that was part of the rationale was, if you're doing problems and getting them all wrong, you're not learning anything. And if you're getting them all right, guess what? You're still not learning anything because you didn't know the
Exactly.
material. So there's somewhere in between is the right answer.
Exactly.
So great. Yep, totally. Yep. Any other questions?
If I could just add
Yes,
on to the
yes.
importance of reading at home, you know, the philosophy or the thinking behind having minutes to encourage reading at home, supporting reading at home. We know that research tells us that children become better readers by reading. And we want them to continue reading outside of our classrooms, into our homes, reading for pleasure, reading with their parents. Parents can be reading aloud to their child, you know, regardless of the age. We always encourage family read alouds. Some families might put together book clubs. So we just really do believe that it's important to continue that reading, growing our readers outside of the classroom. And there's various ways that students can do that alongside their family. But I think that I know that's the thinking behind having minutes per reading by grade level.
And Linda, correct me if I'm wrong. And this was something that, you know, reading is reading. It could be also, it never needs to be, it doesn't need to be about fiction. It can be whatever your interest is. As long as you're reading, you're developing your skills, you're able to retain content knowledge, build your vocabulary, it just helps, right? I remember this was another conversation that happened when this policy was developed.
Yes, interest choice is a big part
Everything.
of reading, because then we know that our reader is reading something that he or she is interested, wants to read. Now, that doesn't mean at times that students may not come home with their book from school, and that might be in a certain genre that's taking place during their units of study.
Yes.
But a big part of it is choice and what you're interested in. This was actually part of our parent workshop that we hosted at the beginning of the month. We had a section during that workshop talking about growing our readers outside of school, growing our readers at home, and the importance of continuing the reading, the enjoyment of reading, the choice of reading with family members at home, and choice was a big part of that.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, moving on to the last part, Corey.
Okay, so Jeff and Annie are going to give us a quick update of where we are in the curriculum writing process, which they shared with us a couple months ago.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to share my screen so you have a visual to look at. This has been shared previously with our board. And now I can't actually view what's on the screen. So I think it's there. Yes, Sean, can you tell me that it's up? Okay. I have a hard copy in front of me. So right now you'll see that the timing here is we are in spring and we are in this recruiting and planning phase and capacity building phase. So earlier this year, we went through our processes of any curriculum that was written last year and implemented. We analyzed our current needs and we prioritize that. We monitor, reflect, adjust as you know, the new curriculum and current curriculum is in place. But now we are gearing up to begin planning for our new curriculum projects. So our recruiting and planning is done with Jeff, Linda, and I, Corey, with our department leaders, 612. We are planning on doing curriculum writing training for the teachers who write the curriculum. So that way we have a centralized understanding of what our PS curriculum is and how those units of study are written. So here's just a little bit more detail with, so after our budget approval, we will go through and prioritize our needs for next year and recruit, and then we will analyze that depth of knowledge of our writers, and we will train them. So that way, this new process, the goal of this is so that way the writing happens in the summertime to be implemented in the fall. So that way large projects are not written throughout the school year, but have time to be reflected on, adjusted, tried out, and experienced right away. So that way we're not waiting a whole year to implement a curriculum. We are getting it prepared and ready to roll for professional development with the opening of school next year. So that's where we are currently at. We are in phase 3.
And if I could just add on to, because the professional learning piece of this, being in the district, having worked in curriculum writing for a number of years now, the professional learning piece, I think I can't be understated, because what we're doing is we're really training people to be curriculum writers, right? The skill set of a teacher and the skill set of a curriculum writer, they're a little different. So what we're really doing is some intentional planning on not just our template, but on how to craft enduring understandings, essential questions, to not just get at the scope and sequence of what's being taught, but trying to get our teachers to think about the bigger picture. And that has to start with a solid curriculum that gives the overview and the big picture, the large concepts. So what we're doing is we're going to be spending time training our curriculum writers this spring to kick off summer writing in July. And then what will then happen is at the beginning of next year, those new curriculums, whether it's from a new course, like Corey mentioned earlier, or whether it's a revision or an upgrade to an existing course, we'll be able to do a curriculum walkthrough and training with our teachers at the start of next year before they actually jump into the teaching of that throughout the year. So our curriculum writers will be the ones that will be kind of giving that training along with, our department leadership. But what it does, it kind of creates this assured experience whenever we create any sort of curriculum upgrade, that the written curriculum becomes the taught curriculum, which is also very important. And I think the only other point to highlight here is, as of right now, it's all budget dependent, right? So we can't make a final decision on what projects get written until we have a final budget approval and the town votes for our budget. So once that happens, and they can support the budget as written, then we can start really allocating what curriculum projects get tapped into, and then we can actually get our recruitment. So while we're starting that work, I do just want to emphasize that it is still, budget dependent, based on the approval.
Jeff, I think that what you just said was so important. And I think, I know that's why we wanted to bring this process back and update the committee with it, because the idea that the written curriculum becomes the taught curriculum seems so simple and obvious, but it actually is not. There are unfortunately many, many systems that create amazing documents that never see classrooms. So what we're highlighting here for you is how we are making sure that that written curriculum becomes actually the taught curriculum, because once teachers teach it, then we can work together to make real-time and then reflective revisions to best meet the needs of our kids. We are not working in isolation, we're working as a team. So I hope that you can see from this update that we are setting up our teams to be collaborative, to have common lenses, to have support, and then really setting up appropriate professional learning to make sure that that implementation is a success and is supported along the way. So thank you, Jeff and Annie, for that.
Thank you.
And I can just add it from the elementary perspective. We follow a similar process. And again, as Jeff noted, budget depending, one of our primary focuses for curriculum development this summer will center around updating our curriculum guides to support the new resources that we're putting in place in mathematics, grades 3-5, and then of course, our foundational skills, phonics, and grades K, or actually PK to grade 2.
Anyone have any questions?
I'm just glad we're investing in curriculum again. I've said it a lot of times. It's been a couple of years since we've done this investment, and it doesn't feel like the urgency doesn't feel like we're acting like we're behind, which is good. We're doing this pragmatically, we're doing this deliberatively, and it seems we're following a good roadmap to get us back on track where we should have been.
Thanks.
Agreed. And I'm not going to say, I'm going to say what Sean said because you said it. Any other questions? Okay, perfect. An hour. Thank you all so much. It was great to hear an update. I'm glad we could have this conversation, and I look forward to continuing these conversations in fall, especially about some of the topics we talked about. So thank you all, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank
Hopefully,
you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the weather.
Thank you.
Thank you.